We all have self. Self is like the sun behind the clouds. This is a IFS practitioner shared this quote. And the sun is always there, but the clouds are in the way. And so when we start to release the clouds, the presence of self can emerge. And so self is compassionate, connected, courageous, calm, creative, clear. When we have these moments of self, then we can let self help these younger parts of us.
Do you ever feel stuck in patterns that hold you back, like self-doubt, stress, or repeating cycles that you just can't seem to break no matter how hard you try? Well, what if the way forward isn't about trying harder and pushing harder, but pausing, getting curious, and connecting with yourself in a whole new way? As we step into a new year, it's the perfect time to really explore this question with someone who's made it her life's work to guide others towards healing and growth. My guest today is Gabby Bernstein, the #1 New York Times bestselling author, speaker, and a true trailblazer in emotional healing. In her upcoming book, Self-Help, which is out next week, Gabby introduces us to internal family systems, or IFS therapy, a powerful framework for self-help that helps us identify the different parts of ourselves that hold pain and protection, and then work with them to create real healing through curiosity and compassion. It's the perfect framework for creating real transformation as we head into a new year. In our conversation, Gabby opens up about her personal journey with IFS and how it's really helped her overcome self-doubt, break free from old and inherited family patterns, and create more balance and clarity in her life. We even share a real-time example from just before we started recording this episode, where Gabby used the IFS framework to navigate her emotions. You'll hear about her 4-step process for connecting with your emotions, healing generational trauma, and really transforming how you care for yourself. Plus, we'll explore how emotional healing goes beyond just feeling better. It can also enhance your physical health and your longevity. So, if you've ever felt overwhelmed by negative emotions or been stuck in cycles of stress or self-criticism, and you're ready to leave old patterns behind and step into the new year with clarity and confidence, this episode will give you the tools to reconnect with yourself in a compassionate way and create meaningful change in your life. So excited to share this conversation with Gabby Bernstein. I'm Dr. Avanti, and this is The Healing Catalyst. Gabby, it's so great to be with you. I feel like this morning is a really good time to be with you, given that it is the day after the U.S. election, that when we are recording this. I know it's not going to go live until December, but
Here we are.
mm-hmm.
Here we are. It's really good to be with you too, because for the past 15 minutes, you've witnessed me go through a tech difficulty at a time when I'm having like hormonal upheaval, and witnessing me with my husband trying to fix the tech and the dynamic that can bring.
Yep.
And all of the parts of me that just showed up. So we've never met before, and you're witnessing me sort of in this triggered moment is the best word, right? So we've just received these results of this election. I'm hormonal. My tech isn't working. I'm sweating. You're here. I have 6 hours ahead of me of recordings. And so and then my husband's there, the dynamic of that. So there's these extreme parts of me coming through. And when we began, before we started, I said to you, I'd like to just be clear about where I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as I was able to voice that clarity, I felt a connection between us.
Right.
And my system settled.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to go from clarity and connection to, oh, this is a nice distraction. What a great way to spend the next hour.
Right.
Instead of being stuck in that part that I was in 3 seconds ago.
Yep.
And that whole encounter, while it was somewhat embarrassing for me, and not anymore because we're connected, But, and it was frustrating for my husband, and he's, like, left sweating, and the
Yes.
whole situation was a miracle for me because that was my process that we're here to talk about today in full effect.
Yes. And actually, I was quite aware of that because, your team sent me your book and I read through it. And as I always do a lot of research on people before I interview them. And as you were going through all of that and I was witnessing it for 15 minutes, I was thinking, wow, she is really practicing what she preaches. And so I'm really, really um, intrigued and curious. And I think it's amazing that you practice what you preach. And so I witnessed that, which is really, really beautiful. So thank you for that.
It's easy to practice our principles when things are going right, and
For
and
sure.
it's and it's awesome to practice it when things are going wrong.
I agree. I always say to my patients and students, when I'm suggesting different practices, and they're like, "Well, is it really going to make a difference?" I'm like, "Just do it for a couple weeks and then stop doing it for a few days, and you'll notice because it's when you don't do it that you notice." It's sort of the same thing, right? That we don't notice when we're doing these practices on a regular basis how much they are settling us, how much they're helping us, how much they're healing us until we take a moment to become aware, right? Or we don't do them anymore. We're like, "Oh, shit, I feel a little off today." Right?
Yeah. And I think that the real miracle is when the practice it becomes the louder voice in the room.
Mm,
So
mhm.
when you practice as any form of self-help or spiritual development or therapeutic practices so often that it becomes more of it's a muscle that you can build. That muscle becomes so much stronger than the pull to go into the other parts of who we are. And never does that mean that we don't experience issues, because here in this moment, I was in a burnout breakdown moment. And to be able to have those tools so ingrained in our system that we can rely on them, and that when I said that they become the loudest voice in the room, what I mean is that the pull to check out is there, but it's not as strong as the pull to check in.
Yeah. It actually becomes the check-in voice becomes the dominant voice that can take you in a different direction. Whereas most of us, I think, we live in this state of being where we're in the checkout mode, right? That's our default, right? And that actually kind of let's dive into your book because that actually gets into sort of the things I wanted to talk to you about. Your new book, Self-Help, is about internal family systems, something that I've studied, in my medical career and always known a little bit about, but honestly not known a lot about. But when I was reading your book, I was thinking a lot about IFS, generational trauma, epigenetics, longevity, lots of things that have been in my mind because I have a new book coming out in December also, the longevity formula. And I was just thinking about the connection. So before we dive into all of that, let's talk about what IFS is. For anybody who's listening who may not know, could you just give us a little bit on what exactly internal family systems therapy is?
I'll start by saying that IFS therapy is the therapy that really tipped the scale for me, because I've been in therapy for 2 decades or more. I've had all kinds of spiritual development, sober 19 years, lots of different spiritual paths that I have embarked on, and also my own spiritual path of just what I've chosen for myself. And so I have a lot of faith, I have a lot of foundation. IFS, like I said, tipped the scale because what it offered me was a way of relating to my inner world that was an effective tool and therapy for calming the parts of myself that have been so protective and extreme. Right before we got on this call, was just on a call with my very close friend and mentor, the founder of IFS. His name is Dr. Richard Schwartz, who you know. And as you mentioned, today is the day after the election. And and I'll get into what IFS is, but I'll just tell this story.
Yeah,
We're
no.
in this, we're in this we're in this moment of less than half of the country feels like they're in crisis, and more than a little bit more than half of the country is celebrating. And so there's a great division, and the people have spoken. And Jake and I get on the phone with our shared politics, and we're sort of in this place of, okay, what's now? And it was very clear to me that the work that he's taught has had such a radical shift on me, which I'm going to teach and talk about today, that it just kept coming. It's go time, and we have to spread the message, because the real healing of the world, and the healing of the divisive nature, and the healing of the the rhetoric and the horrors that many of us have experienced and some of us have not experienced in the same way, will come from the individual healing and the internal leadership that we all need to access. And so I'm really proud to be with you today to teach this model, and to teach it in the way that I have been able to democratize it with his blessing. So for your audience, internal family systems therapy has nothing to do with your external family. It has to do with an inner family of little children that live inside of us. And just like, I'll use my example from before. So I get on with you, your beautiful face is on the screen. My microphone is set up differently than it should be. I have 6 hours ahead of me of recording with no break. And so I go into this panic state, and then I call my husband, come help me fix this microphone. And I'm freaking out about the microphone. And prior to you being here, I'm freaking out about the global situations. And I'm also freaking out about this other thing that didn't come through that was supposed to make it easier for me. And there's a part of me that's like boiling inside, burning up, wanting to grind my teeth and scream at my husband. And what's that part of me? I'm very familiar with that part of me. She's 5 years old, and she's screaming at the top of her lungs, nobody can help me.
Mhm.
Nobody is helping me. And it makes me really emotional, even
Yeah.
just like being
Yeah.
with her right now. I have to do it all by myself. And there she is right here, right now. And you witnessed her. You saw her coming in. You saw the redness in my face. I had to shut off the mute you and shut the video off. And she was just right there. And she could have carried on the rest of the day, and she'll probably come back at moments throughout the day because it's an activated day, and that's just where she's at. But I was able, through the practice that I'm going to teach you and through the model that we're talking about, was able to witness her and speak for her rather than as her. And so
Mhm.
the moment that I said to you, I'd like to just offer some clarity,
Mhm.
that clarity created connection. It offered compassion for myself rather than shame, which was another direction I could have gone in. And when I was in that place of clarity and connection and compassion, I was able to start to feel a little creative, which was like, oh, you know what? Let's just actually check. Let's just like have some fun for the next hour. And I was able to feel that courage to just take on the day a little bit more. And that whole process is what I call self-help, and it's based on the principles of internal family systems therapy. And so the miracle that I just shared is the miracle of being able to recognize that the extreme parts of ourselves, the part of me that wanted to rage at my husband and give up on this day, isn't who I am as an adult resourced person. It's actually a young part of me that's been around for my entire life. And so when we start to witness that the extreme patterns, behaviors, addictions, and any type of extreme dissociation, binging, raging, screaming at our husbands, all the things that we do that we feel guilty about later. We say, "Oh, that a part of me took over. I don't know what came over me," or "I'm really controlling," or "I'm really can't put down a drink and I can't make that change and I just can't, love myself," or all the things that we have as extreme patterns have been around for a really long time,
Yep.
and they're protection mechanisms.
Mhm.
And in IFS, they're called protector parts. And who are these protection mechanisms protecting? Who was that rage earlier that you saw boiling in my skin protecting? She's protecting the little girl who's screaming and saying, nobody's helping me.
Yeah. You know what really struck me that you said is that you were speaking for her, not as her. I think that is so important to really, really click into, because what you did by saying, I just want to be clear, let me give some clarity. You were speaking for her, not as a 5-year-old, like just freaking out and raging and all those things, right? And so it's these parts, right? I know in IFS, they talk about these different parts of us, our internal parts or parts of the mind. Can you explain what that means? And I know you talk
Yeah,
about,
so now let me simplify it.
yeah,
I actually have decided that when I come on these podcasts, I'd rather teach this from self-help because when I teach it from IFS and I start using a lot of the IFS language, I notice that people might check out a bit. And so I'd rather do what I've done, which is democratize this model. So
sure.
everything I'm teaching you is based on the principles of internal family systems
Hmm.
therapy, but it's a self-help tool. So what I'm teaching isn't what would happen necessarily word for word in an IFS session, but it's all based on the principles. Okay. So I like to keep it very simple
Sure.
and keep it like an easy to access. So we all have these extreme parts of ourselves that act out in different ways. And we can maybe identify them right here, right now, like I just did before: control, rage, all the isms, right? Alcoholism, workaholism, so we have these different parts. And these behaviors and patterns are known as protection mechanisms. And they are with us on a day-to-day basis, often managing our lives. So anytime we get triggered, we go right into these protection mechanisms, protector part.
Sure.
And we'll go in and we'll start raging because we feel out of control, or we'll start overly controlling because we don't want to feel a shameful feeling, or we'll overcompensate, or we'll people please, or all of the above. We know these things that we do. And when we can start to witness these patterns and behaviors as not who we are, but a part of who we are, what happens is we can see that these patterns and behaviors are actually masking something much deeper. And they're protectors. They're protecting us from very young, oftentimes young, traumatic events that we experience, and maybe even adult traumatic events, but moments in our life, particularly young moments, when we didn't have the capacity to face or heal or process big extreme experiences. So trauma with a big T, trauma with a small t. So my little girl was trauma. She experienced sexual trauma as a child, and she experienced a very inadequate upbringing that did not provide her with the safety that she needed. And so she built up a core belief, and that if I don't do it, nobody else will do it. And then she protected herself by just controlling everything. And she protected herself by becoming addicted to cocaine and alcohol and love and all the different addictions that I've experienced throughout my life. And so the young parts are called exiled parts in IFS. They're little extreme, little people that can't handle it. They don't have the processing. And so instead of having somebody pull them aside and say, I'm going to support you and process you through this, we just, as little people, build up protection mechanisms. And we think, okay, well, I was bullied, so now I have to be the bully, or I feel inadequate, so now I have to be perfectionist, or I was sexually abused, and I'm going to binge over that. And we do all these things to protect ourselves from ever having to feel or face the impermissible experience from our childhood exiled moments. So there's protectors and there's exiles. And so what happens is we live in this world where we're just constantly going from protector to protector to protector because these exiled little children are still inside of us. They didn't have the healing or the resurrection that they need or the support to feel soothed and safe. And so they're just constantly being pushed down, shut down by the protection mechanisms. So anyone listening is like, oh, okay, wow, yeah, maybe I do binge when I get upset, or I do act out in this way, or maybe I'm always all day long blended with this protection mechanism of control, or I'm all day long, or at these extreme moments in my life, I go there. Or today, as we face into the truth of our political views being sort of not where we wanted them to be in our experience, activated.
Yep.
So the beauty of this practice is that we all have self with a capital S, and self is an ever-present energy that's inside of all of us. And self maybe you might have called self God, or universal energy, or Buddha nature, or spiritual essence, or love within you. And self is almost like an inner parent. And it's an adult, resourced, undamaged energy inside of us. And we all have self. And there's a beautiful quote that I share in the book of self is like the sun behind the clouds. This is a IFS practitioner shared this quote. And the sun is always there, but the clouds are in the way. And so when we start to release the clouds, the presence of self can emerge. And so self is compassionate, connected, courageous, calm, creative, clear, like I was with you, clarity. When we have these moments of self, then we can let self help these younger parts of us. So, what I'm going to present everybody with today is a 4-step process of bringing the qualities of self, curiosity, compassion, and connection to the younger protection mechanisms. And so instead of checking out all the time and going to the food or going to the booze or going to the whatever, the rage or the alcohol or the blendedness,
Mhm,
we check in.
mhm.
And the more we check in, the more safety we feel, the more calm we feel, the more we trust that that self energy is there. And then the more second nature that becomes. And then you're in a moment where you're freaking out and you're with a stranger that you really admire and you can check in automatically and offer clarity and you can come back to peace and you can actually have a really good conversation.
So before you go into the four-step process, I just want to ask one question about the self sort of being almost this parental energy to help with all these little parts of us, right? And I think what's really interesting is that the protection mechanisms that those little parts of us, it's frozen in time from when we were 5 or 10 or 12 or whatever, right? Our protective mechanisms were all that we knew. So it's not to feel bad that that's where you go because that's all you knew as a young child, right? Your brain has only developed so much. And so the protective mechanisms we know as a 5-year-old, as a 10-year-old are to scream or to hide or to binge or to act out, right? All of these coping
Yes.
mechanisms. And so there's no shame in that. I think what you're getting at is that what we're trying to do is to sort of say to that little person, that little part of us, "It's okay. I know where you wanna go. I know what you wanna do, but let's try something different. Let's calm down. Let's try something else."
It's actually it's even enough step further than that, right? Because if you just were to say to yourself, "Let's calm down," the part of you would be like, "F you."
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
So
Right,
that's where these steps are
right.
so
Let's
curated
Mhm.
with the model of IFS behind them, right? So I'll take you through the steps because think about it. I have a 6-year-old, and if he's freaking out and I just say, "Let's calm down," he's gonna
Yeah.
be like, freak out more, right?
Yeah, I was gonna bring
So
out
what do
more.
I need to do? I need to know that he's willing to check in with me, to get some buy-in from him. I need to offer him some curiosity. I need to make some kind of compassionate connection, and then I need to let him experience the shift. That's the 4 steps that I'm gonna take you through as you would to your own inner child, the same way I would with my own child,
Great.
okay?
Yeah.
So, right here, right now, I'll use myself again as an
Yeah,
example
let's
'cause
use it. Yeah.
it's real-time example.
Mhm.
The part of me that's, controlling, let's call her the controller, is in the room, and she's grinding her teeth, and she's freaking out, and she's losing it because she sees that nothing's working, and it's the difficult day in the world for her. And so internally, what I would do in that moment is I actually did it. I shut off the microphone in the video and I stepped away. So I stepped away from the chaos. And the first step is to choose to check in with the part. So I'm aware, I'm activated. And you don't even need to know what part of it is. It is
Right.
you can feel anxious, you can just feel active, feel outraged. If you
Yep.
don't feel something that's good and content, you can check in,
Exactly.
right?
Mhm.
And so I'm like, I gotta check in. So I step away and I choose to check in is the first step. And that choice to check in is very crucial because you don't want to just say things to yourself like calm down, right? Because it's just going to create more shame and more activation. So the choice to check in is, you know what, instead of freaking out and checking out and spending the rest of my day grinding my teeth and punching things, I'm going to check in right now. And I focus my attention inward in that first step. And I got buy-in from that part of me that I can check in.
Yep.
That's a huge step. People might take a while to get there, okay?
No, it's huge. It's huge. It's what I teach all the time that, living in an Ayurvedic way is all about awareness.
That's right.
That's the first step. Everyone will say, "Well, how do I do this?" I'm like,
Yep.
become aware of the choices you're making and the choices you're not making.
And aware of your sensations and
Exactly.
feelings.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's step 1, choose to
Yeah.
check in. Step 2 is beautiful. Curiosity. So I started to question, okay? I I didn't need much curiosity in that moment because I was pretty clear about what was going on, but curiosity, where do I feel that in my body? I'm clenching my jaw, my stomach is tight, my fists go like this. What are there any thoughts or feelings or sensations that are associated with this reaction, this part of me? Any images that this wants to show me, any stories. And I just become curious for a few moments, offering that curiosity. And once I get a sense of the part of me, you saw me get a little emotional when I was talking about her earlier, and I have that sensation of that younger part of me. I then will offer compassionate connection to that controlling part of me. And I'll ask that part of me, what do you need? And those words enough are the way to compassionately connect. And what you might hear are things like, I need to rest. I need to speak up. I need to be seen. I need to be clear. That's what my part said. I need to be clear, right? I need to dance. Sometimes they want to just like relax and be fun. I need to be free. And then I do the fourth step, which is to check for those C qualities of self. Okay. Has self come through? Yes. I feel more clear. I could use that word. I feel compassion towards myself. I felt calmer after the check-in. I felt creative, like that started to come through. They started to speak for that part. And so you check for these C qualities. And even if you have just a glimmer of one of those C qualities, it's worked.
Mm-hmm.
And then, my friend, you rinse and repeat,
Mm-hmm.
rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat.
So what if when you're becoming curious, you don't know the answer to the question that you're asking yourself? Like you don't know how to check in or you don't know what to do. What do you do then?
I would suggest people start this four-step process with a part of them that's somewhat extreme, but not so extreme, right? So we're not working with those little exiled parts. We're just working with the parts that are managing our day-to-day life. We're
Okay.
not even going to the addictive parts. We're just going to like the controlling part or the people pleaser or
Mhm.
maybe the part that dissociates and watches YouTube. And whenever you notice anxiety is a great part to check in with because we are often aware of our anxiety,
Yep.
right? Or fear. And so whenever you have enough awareness that you're in a place, a feeling, a sensation, or a behavior that's not desirable, that's a cue to check in.
Of course.
And so you have to have that awareness and that desire. So if you're reading the book or you're listening to this, and you're like, oh, let me practice this. Okay, you have that awareness. That's the choice to check in. That's just saying, I notice I'm here and I have awareness that I want to move inward. And then the second step of curiosity, it's not really about trying to do anything. It's just about asking. And I like to do this, there's a whole practice in the book all about journaling this process. So if you're someone who doesn't actually visually see things internally, or you can't actually somatically connect physically, journaling would be great. So you can just ask the questions in a journal. Where do I feel this extreme feeling in my body? What do I know about this feeling? How old is it? How long has it been around? And the prompts are all in the book. What does it want me to know? Are there any feelings, thoughts, or sensations that it wants me to know? And you can just free write, and you'll be blown away by what comes through. So that's maybe an easier access into the curiosity. And once you have a little bit of a connection, then you offer that question compassionately. What do you need? And then let it write more. Let the part of
Mhm.
you write more. You're letting this young protection mechanism inside of you speak up, be seen,
Mhm.
be heard. And you're allowing it to be seen through the lens of these steps, right? The curiosity and the connection and the compassion, which are all self-like qualities. And if that part does feel like it's been able to release the truth and the clarity and the connection, and it feels like compassion, then self will emerge naturally. And you'll start to feel this presence just expanding inside that says, it's okay, we're safe and we're okay.
Yeah. I think that that's really important because I think so many of us get into our heads when we're doing these types of processes, right? And so we might be writing and saying, what do we need? And our first reaction might be to go to behaviors that we've done in the past, right? Oh, well, I'm just going to go eat a tub of ice cream. I'm going to go watch TV. I'm going to zone out, right? But I think what you're saying is so important because checking in again and saying, how does that actually feel? That what do I need? The answer I'm giving, is it making me feel better? Is it making me feel like I have a shift? Right? Because it could be so easy to just go right back into that same pattern of like, oh, I've checked in now and I'm, writing all this stuff. And okay, what do I need as ice cream?
Well, you know what? We might do that. And that's okay because it's not about, this is a really compassionate process. It's an IFS. What's nice about IFS is that it's completely non pathologizing.
Mhm.
So it's just seeing that we're just trying to protect ourselves. And these protector parts have a very important role. And they've done a lot of, listen, my controlling part has written 10 books in 14 years, and she's done a lot of beautiful work in the world. And so I'm working with her every day to help her become less extreme, to not shut her down, to not stop her, to not force her into another role, but to connect to her regularly through curiosity and compassion and connection regularly, multiple times a day, to help her feel safer inside so that she has more and more of that presence of self. And so that she can speak for what she needs and she can be clear. And let me tell you something, I'm experiencing the miracle. Do I not get irate in moments? No, I did. You just saw it. But what is beautiful is that I can now, for the past month, let's just call it a month, because it's really starting to click for me in a big way right now.
Mhm.
I can go to my team and I can say really difficult things like, I need more help. I need you guys to show up in different ways.
Mm.
And I can be really clear. This isn't how I want to work anymore. And I can be really clear without being a bitch. That's the miracle.
Yeah. What's coming up for me as you're saying this is sort of a process that I've been through. I went through a breast cancer journey a year ago, 2023. It came out of nowhere. And, this past year I've been in remission and just sort of getting my strength back,
God
jumping
bless,
back into
God bless,
work. Yeah.
God bless.
And, so many of the realizations I came out of that process are very similar to what you're talking about, because I really had to sit with myself and say, okay, what's this next era going to be like for me? I'm 53. I had just turned 50 at the time. And um, I was sort of like, okay, where's my life going now? I've launched both my kids off into the world. I'm an empty nester. What's it going to look like? And then breast cancer comes out of fucking nowhere, right? And I'm writing my second book and I have to pause it and the whole thing, right? I really had to get really clear and sort of sit down with myself and say, what is my first go-to as far as protecting myself? Because I could have shut myself, inside the house and not connected with anybody and done the controlling part. I'm identifying with so many of the things that you're saying, Gabby, because I'm very similar in the sense of, I had some things happen to me when I was a kid, and I have been a perfectionist to compensate, to deal with that. That's how I've protected myself. And so I went into, I can muscle through this, no problem. I've got it. I teach people how to take care of themselves. I teach people how to heal. I'll get through breast cancer. Okay, I'll do it. And instead, I really sat with myself. I became very aware of where I was going and what was happening. And I realized, oh, yeah, you need to do things differently. This is for you to really get through this. You've got to put that protective part that is speaking as little Avanti, as that part of me, and speak for me, which is what I did was I said, I'm going to share this with everyone and I'm going to ask people for help. I'm going to receive love. And that's what I did. And I have been operating from that perspective ever since. And so for me, it has completely shifted how I do things in the world, how I show up.
I'd love to reflect that back to you because I witnessed that newfound immersion of little Avanti here
Mhm.
when I was like stressed and and you're like, none of this matters. You were like, tech issues, whatever.
Yeah.
And you were really living that truth. So I just would love to just give you that just genuine mirror back to you that is actually what you're embodying. And I know that this seems like a minor thing, but it's not, right? Because it could have pissed you off, or you can be like, I have a busy day, and they were 15 minutes behind, and there's many reasons that could have been annoying for you. It's a difficult day for all of us, right? For many of us, and so you just sat there and like, doesn't really matter. I'm just going to be here now.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the
It,
miracle.
yeah. And probably a few years ago, at least 10 years ago, and even 5 years ago, I would have been like, "Oh god, I have so much to do." And I'd be thinking about, "Oh, now I have to do this, and that's gonna get delayed, and this," and I'm just like, it'll be fine."
And that also is self-presence, right? Like that calmness that you had extended a lot of calmness to me. And self begets self. So you being in that calm energy gave me even more presence of calm to untangle myself more.
Mhm.
And you talk about this a lot, but like when we're with, even with like children's or partners, and our energy affects
Yeah,
the energy.
of course.
And so the more access to self that we get, the more we can be be a support system energetically with the others. So yeah, your calmness was very helpful for me there. And it also just like to say, what a beautiful thing to witness you and your health and your vitality right here, right now.
Thank you. So what that's also bringing up for me is that, the connection that we have with each other, right? You're talking about how I energetically was able to share that with you, right? I'm also wondering, because a lot of things came up for me with thinking about generational trauma and sort of how does that connect to even how we react, right, in this internal family system sort of model, right, of these parts of us that are protecting us from trauma that we've had. Do you think that there's a connection there with how
100%.
it connects us to generational trauma?
Yeah. And I'm so excited to read your book. You're saying it's about epigenetics and generational.
Longevity,
Yeah.
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. Oh God, I'm so excited to read this. I come from uh Holocaust survivors. And my grandmother was a Holocaust survivor and that whole side of her family. And so I think that's very present. I've actually started to feel that very physically at some
Mhm.
of the things that we've been witnessing with anti-Semitism and the rise. And I believe that also from the lineage of the women in my life and their own sexual traumas and what that's impacted me on an epigenetic level and also just on a uh, parts level, right? Because the burdens are passed on energetically and even in the womb.
Mhm.
So maybe somebody might be thinking, like, I didn't experience anything, but your mother's trauma is very present in your
For
system,
sure.
right? Or, your whoever else in the family.
Right.
So we can only do our own work with our own parts. We can't fix other people's parts. But what we can know is that as we heal our own parts, we heal the next generation. And so I know that birthing in a calm way was, actually, I don't even wanna say, 'cause plenty of people don't birth in a calm way, and I don't want them to freak out. But the work I've been doing on myself, I do believe is going to benefit my son, not just because of the presence that I have in his life, but also because of the imprint that energetically is being imprinted upon him. Yeah,
Yeah.
and then his future children as well.
Yeah. Well, I also think it goes backwards too. So it goes forward to our children or the generations that come after us. But I think what I was also thinking about is that when you are going through this four-step process of checking in, right? And sort of acknowledging that part of yourself is trying to protect, right? That reaction is also coming from energetically, I believe, from generations before you, right? So whether it
100%.
was your mother who experienced similar types of protective mechanisms within her small parts, right? Her little parts, and that gets passed to you as to how you then react, right? And even actually, even the way you see the world, because, that 5-year-old Avanti that may have gone through something, my experience and how it shows up as little t or big T in my mind is absolutely influenced by what I am carrying generationally in me from my mother. So it may be a response that's also being informed from this energetic trauma that I'm carrying.
It's what, Dick Schwartz and IFS would call legacy burdens,
Mm.
that it's not just from our own experience, it's from the legacy, and that's real.
Yeah, yeah. And so this brings up so much because, I think sometimes when folks read about these different methods of self-help, of trying to transform themselves or to work on themselves or whatever, to grow, sometimes it can feel like, okay, well, how is this really going to help me? And what I'm trying to connect right now, the dots, even for myself as we're talking, is that when you do these things, they actually help you incredibly because it's not just the energetics. I mean, because sometimes people are like, I don't get that. It's too woo woo, whatever. But what I'm saying is that it actually has a direct effect on your longevity from a
Yes.
Western medical
Yes,
perspective because yep.
100,000%.
And so that is so important for all of us to understand is that when we are doing these types of processes, like what you've so beautifully outlined in your new book, you are actually helping to extend your longevity from my perspective.
Without a doubt, there's actually a chapter in self-help that's called Body Parts. And it calls upon the work of Dr. John Sarno and the psychosomatic effects of trauma and impermissible rage and burdened, exiled parts of us. So the more that we push down those exiles, the more we're pushing down the rage, the shame, the impermissible. And as we work so hard and tirelessly to protect against that impermissible, what's happening? We're creating stress, inflammation, we're cutting off blood flow, we're going into really hardcore sympathetic reactions. And so when we start to tend to these parts of ourselves and actually help them feel a sense of safety and calmness, then that psychosomatic effect of the reaction starts to become softer and softer. The body starts to heal naturally. We go into that parasympathetic state and the stress response starts to relax. Now, the beautiful thing about that is that not only are we having a new feeling inside that's calmer and then therefore affecting every single cell in our body and our viscera and our nervous system and our everything, but we're also releasing the burden of the pain parts, right? So physical pain and jaw tension, like I mentioned earlier, gastro issues, back pain, neck pain, chronic pain are also other forms of protection.
Yes,
Why? Because if I can focus all my attention on my gut pain or my back pain, then I don't have to face the impermissible feelings of terror, rage, and fear that happened to me as a child.
exactly. And so that is completely the work of John Sarno. I mean, I've studied his work and actually even applied it to myself in many ways. And it is John Sarno was an MD, back in the '70s who was doing this work, and he was sort of, like, thought of as nuts for doing
Radical.
this. Yeah, as radical, but it's absolutely true, and I think, the next piece of what you're saying is it's not just the physical pain, but what you're also doing is you're literally affecting your epigenetics, which is epi on top of your genetics, and you're turning on and off the genes, right? And so when we end up with these chronic, issues or a diagnosis of cancer, here I am, hello, it's me, right? I have to think about what was the epigenetic piece there? Because I actually don't have any genetics for breast cancer. So
Right.
what turned on that caused this to happen? Right? And I've really been sitting with that. And so I feel like what you're talking about in this new book with this check-in process is so incredibly important for us to consider in how it affects our long-term health because it's not just the food that we're taking in, it's not just the environment and the toxins, not just the relationships, it's relationship to self that is, I think, like at the base of all of that to start with.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. So I feel like this is a really good place for us to sort of end our time together. We could keep talking, but you have 6 more interviews to do today. So
Well, I feel really grateful to you. One, because I've admired you from afar for quite some time. And I'm just grateful that this is our first connection, and I hope we have many more.
we will.
And I'm grateful to you because it's really a gift to be in the presence of someone else's self energy, and you have so much access to it. And I needed that today, and so I just
Mm.
wanna express a lot of gratitude for that. And that you are living and walking your talk, so thank you.
Thank you. I have
Yeah.
one last question for you.
Yeah, take your time.
So my new book is called The Longevity Formula. In your experience, we've talked a lot about a lot of different things here. What do you see as the essential formula for longevity where our health span equals our lifespan?
I mean, it's so clear for me. Relate to the parts of yourself inside, because as long as you are pushing down and ignoring the extreme patterns, you're going to stay in a state of hypervigilance. And so it doesn't matter what you eat. You said this earlier. Doesn't matter what you eat. It doesn't matter the toxins. It doesn't matter what you breathe. It doesn't matter how many mantras you say. If you're not tending to the impermissible, if you're not tending to the burdened parts of yourself and healing from the inside out, then your longevity, you're literally going to continue to live in the burdened state. And as you build that and build that and build that, your body will be affected. And you'll also just not only live with the physical tension, but you're going to live with the mental tension, and you'll never feel truly free. So I believe wholeheartedly in the process that I'm sharing here. I believe that this is the miracle, right? And
Mm.
it's Dick Schwartz's work. I had the privilege of saying that to him today. Here we are, Dick. This is our moment. This is your moment, all of your trainers, all of your therapists, to spread this internal work because it works. And it's wonderful to be able to be in the service of that mission, but also to be able to put a book out there that says self-help. This is your chance to change your life,
Mhm.
and to mean that,
Mm.
and to know that, because it's completely changed my life. And so for me, longevity means becoming more and more free inside.
Yeah. Gabby, thank you so much for your time today. It's been so lovely to meet you and
So
talk
great
to
to meet you.
you, and I hope that we can do it again soon.
Definitely in person at some
Yes,
point.
absolutely. Thank you.